Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 3rd, 2024. I know many of you out there have taken very seriously the warnings that we've been presenting on the danger of this war escalating to a full-scale World War III, including a nuclear war. Some of you are skeptical. Some of you are saying this is fear-mongering. I'm asking those of you who have not yet fully thought through why we're warning of this, why we put out a red alert, to listen to my words today and then to follow it up by listening to the discussion from last Friday of the International Peace Coalition, which will be linked at the end of the description section. We're dealing with a situation which is moving out of control. Now, it doesn't mean we're definitely going to end up in World War III and all be annihilated in nuclear war, but there's a growing chance that that will happen. And to dismiss it by saying, oh, no one could be that crazy, means you're not paying attention to how crazy the people pushing this actually are. So don't block out the danger of NATO escalation. There's been very little coverage in the Western media of the attacks on the early warning satellite systems of Russia. There were 3 drone attacks last week. Now, the media tends to either not cover it or play it down by saying, well, there was little damage done, or the Russians haven't said much about it, so it couldn't be that important. Not that big a deal. At the same time, there's not much that's being said about the tactical nuclear military exercises that the Russians did, other than to say Putin's bluffing, this is Russia's nuclear blackmail, don't submit to Putin, and so on. So you have a whole series of lines coming from the West, basically saying things are all right, things are moving in the right direction. And then you have the push coming from especially the United Kingdom, from David Cameron, to lift the restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western weapons to target sites inside Russia. Then you had Blinken pick up on this, and then it was announced over the end of last week by Biden that the U.S. is going to allow the use of U.S. long-range weapons to target sites in Russia with limitations. Now, what does that mean with limitations? They're going to set a perimeter of how far they could shoot into Russia. Well, what happens when they start hitting civilians, as they are already? Ukraine is targeting civilian populations in Belgorod, in other parts of Russia. They're targeting energy, storage facilities, and so on. So the idea that Ukraine can use US weapons, can use German weapons, French weapons, that the Danes are committing their F-16 planes to Ukraine. Now, what's next? The ATACMS, the F-16s? We're seeing an escalation in that direction. Now, meanwhile, the NATO foreign ministers just met, and they were elated by the decision to extend the war into Russia. And meanwhile, Russia reiterated that if this happens, this makes NATO member nations complicit and potential targets for Russian counterstrikes. So that's the direction we're going. That's why we're saying it's an expansionary policy. Driven by what? Driven by the desperation of NATO, which is watching as Ukraine is about to fall, and that the war that was launched back in 2014 with the Maidan coup is going to be a failure for the West. So there's an in-depth discussion from Friday with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, with Dr. Ted Postal, who's a weapons expert, spent time in the Pentagon, the various research centers, very articulate spokesman for arms control. Also, Colonel Richard Black, many of you know him, the former top official at the Pentagon for the Judge Advocate Group of the U.S. military. He's involved in this discussion. Colonel Rolf Bossard from retired from Swiss intelligence, and others. A very extensive discussion of what people have to know about this and what you can do about it. And so I, again, urge people to watch it because this is not an esoteric question or a hypothetical question, and we're not using fear mongering. The point is the Ukraine war is lost. NATO's efforts to weaken Russia have actually backfired. Russia is stronger, their economy is stronger, the Russia-Chinese alliance is stronger. Whatever the West intended, which was largely an effort by corporate cartels, City of London and Wall Street, to regime change Putin, to weaken Russia and to set up Russia to be a looting zone for the corporate cartels of the West, that's all been lost. Now add to this the opposition that's grown up internationally to U.S. policy of supporting Israel. The U.S. is pretty much isolated. Maybe a few micro countries in the South Pacific support the U.S. on this. The Brits are still somewhat ambivalent. They always look for a way out rather than accept the loss. But we're headed, the U.S., for a loss in terms of the Israel fight and the Ukraine situation, which means an isolation. Now, what does an isolation of the United States means? Well, it means a rejection of the dollar-based financial system. That's what de-dollarization is. You've heard the term. This is happening very quickly. And it can either happen with the U.S. participating, because having the dollar as the basis of a bloated, collapsing financial system is no great deal. In fact, it's a terrible deal for the American people. There's a new economic system coming into being associated with the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa alliance, which includes 5 new countries have been added. Another 30 or 40 want to be a part of it. They're already trading in their national currencies rather than the dollar because the dollar's been weaponized against them. The global South is moving out from under the dollar system, away from the colonial system that was imposed after World War II, and the new colonial system, and then especially after 1990. You have this Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You have regional development associations, the China Arab Economic Summit, and so on, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Organization of African Unity. Instead of war, the U.S. could be involved with these countries in bilateral and multilateral trade deals instead of imposing a unilateral system of a so-called rules-based order whose rules benefit the banks of London, the banks of Wall Street, and the corporate cartels that are part of the broader alliance, whether it's through the World Economic Forum, whether it's through the International Monetary Fund. It's a move toward a global central bank dictatorship, and most of the world won't support it. Will you as Americans tolerate this? Will you as Northern Europeans tolerate this? The loss of sovereignty of your governments to this blob of international corporate cartels. So the global majority, that's where the United States and Europe should go. Those are the natural trading partners. Those are the countries where we could be helpful participants in their economic development, as well as participants in fair trade. So I want you to become informed and active participants in this transformation of the United States from the center of a predatory empire into a helpful partner of a world of mutual benefit in its economic relationships. So look at the video from May 31st from the International Peace Coalition. There's an invitation to a conference on June 15th and 16th. Sign up for it now, get your friends involved. And again, there's the link for you to have for 1 month free a subscription to the EIR Daily News so you can be informed. And if you disagree with us on something, ask us. Let's have a discussion. Dialogue. That's the key to advancing human knowledge. So let me leave it at that. I'll see you again tomorrow.
What it is that you might be able to do which can contribute to bringing about a solution, an escape from the collapse of civilization. This is no pipe dream. This is no fantasy. This is real.